Welcome to our few moments together on the Parsha. This Shabbos, we have the privilege of reading Parshas Chaye Sarah, the Parsha that is known as the life of Sarah. And of course, even though it speaks about the life of Sarah at the first pasuk, the entire Sedra continues on after Sarah had died. And in fact, at the very beginning of the Parsha, when the Parsha begins to talk about Sarah, it says that Vayavo Avraham lispod l'Sarah v'liv kosa, that Avraham came to be maspid Sarah, to say a eulogy for Sarah and to cry for her. There are many questions on that particular pasuk, but one of the outstanding things is that the word v'liv kosa, and to cry for her, is written with an unusual letter, very small. It says v'liv kosa, and to cry for her, from the word bechi, boche, crying. The kaf is a small kaf. And the question is, of course, in the Torah itself, when you look at it, you see that the letter of v'liv kosa, the kaf, is a small kaf. Why is v'liv kosa written with a small kaf? Rashi, when talking about the pasuk in which we hear about the life of Sarah, the pasuk uses the following terminology. The pasuk says, "Vayehi chaye Sarah," and they were the days of the life of Sarah, mea shana, 100 years, the esrim shana, and 20 years, the sheva shanim, and 7 years. The next pasuk tells us that Sarah died in Hebron, in the land of Canaan, and Avram comes liv kosa, to cry over her, to say a eulogy and to cry over her. And the chaf, as we mentioned, is a small chaf. Now, why is the chaf small? What's the reason why the chaf is small? And the Baal HaTurim deals with that particular question, and he says that he didn't cry that much over her because she was a wonderful person all her life, who lived a very long life, and she never sinned. In fact, it's based on the first pasuk, in which it says that she was 100 years old, and 20 years old, and 7 years old. Didn't have to say years in each particular place. So Rashi tells us that it's telling us that she was as beautiful at 20 as she was at 7, very innocent and beautiful. And at the age of 100, she was as much without sin as she was at 20. So the word v'liv kosa, and to cry for her, is written with a small kaf to tell us that he didn't cry too much because she lived a good life. Reb David Feinstein, Zechrono Livracha, asks the question, why is it that the kaf is small, to draw attention to it, when the kaf refers to the age of 20? If you're talking about the fact that Avraham didn't cry too much, why didn't he use the first letter of the word bechi, or belche, which is a beis? Why didn't he use the word, the letter beis, which means crying, rather than the word kaf, which is in the middle? And Reb David, in his own inimitable fashion, says something so beautiful. Of course, no matter when a righteous person dies, there's crying on the part of all who are going to remain alive and are going to be missing the fact that they will no longer be in the presence of this wonderful person. First of all, because that person will not be around to do any more good deeds, which is good for the entire world, and certainly that no one else is going to be able to learn from that person. But Reb David Zatzal focuses on that change that we said, instead of emphasizing that maybe the Torah could have written the liv kosa with a small beis, it used a small chaf. Why is that? So he provides the answer that tells us that when a child is 7 years old, a child of 7 years old is not a sinner, God forbid. There's no opportunity for sin. And Sarah, when she was 20 years old, she was as beautiful as she was at 7. And when she was 100 years old, she was as much without sin as she was at the age of 20. Now, the age of 20, to be without sin, as we know, requires a tremendous effort and a tremendous loyalty and relationship with Hashem. You're so close and in with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, pervading your neshama, that you can't possibly think of sin. We don't think of 7-year-olds as doing sin. And elderly people, certainly, we have a tendency to look when a person is 100 years old, what kind of sins are they going to do at 100 years old? Of course, maybe in today's day and age, that should not be a question. But nevertheless, we see that it's so. It's so that people, when they get older age, do not sin. And when they're 7, they don't sin. But at 20, from 20 to 100, it's very possible that a person in their young and middle age might be drawn into sin. As we take a look at the world and we see that that's so. One of the unique things about Klal Yisrael is that we have this purity in our lives, no matter how old we get. When we're young and vibrant, even to when we're in old age, we tend to try the best we can to infuse our souls with the presence of our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not to allow our neshama to draw itself into Aveira. And so the Torah emphasized the Chaf, because the Chaf is the age of 20. And the Torah wanted to say, says Reb David, that the age of 20, when the juices are flowing and when the desires are great, that's when Sarah was pure and holy, just as the Torah wants us to be, by emphasizing that particular letter rather than the Beis. And consequently, we have a beautiful, beautiful lesson here from the concept that even though Abraham did cry, as we all cry when a tzaddik leaves, we don't have that person's presence anymore. When Reb David, whose yahrzeit was so recently passed away, didn't we all feel a special loss of this great individual that no longer was around to inspire us with his simple, pure logic and with his open clarity of the Torah from the beginning to the end, and certainly in this week's Parsha. And consequently, when we talk about the life of Sarah, she was pure from the age of 7 in her beauty, and from the rest of her life till she passed away at 127 without sin, as we understand from the beautiful explanation of a David Feinstein Zichrono Livracha. I want to wish everyone a wonderful Shabbos. We should take these things in mind and think to ourselves of all the wonderful lessons that our Gedolim have left behind for us to learn from and to enjoy the beauty of the Parsha of Parshas Chaye Sarah. I want to wish everyone a wonderful Shabbat Shalom Uvarach, an upcoming Rosh Chodesh that's going to be filled with light. The Yom Tov of Hanukkah, of course, is coming up. And so a Shabbat Shalom Uvarach, a Chodesh Tov to everyone and to all of Klal Yisrael.